Nothing really affects comedy. People always need it. They need it so badly, and they don't get it. This is the result of the extreme left and PC crap and people worrying so much about offending other people.
So that is obviously, comedy icon, legend, Jerry Seinfeld expressing what he has for the last decade or so about comedy, the sort of thing you hear a lot of older comics talking about. So we're hardly surprised by that. But that said, he goes on a bit at length about why he thinks censorship or feelings being hurt is affecting comedy. And he's certainly an expert on comedy. So let's give him a chance to make his case. Take a look at this.
Nothing really affects comedy. People always need it. They need it so badly, and they don't get it. It used to be you would go home at the end of the day. Most people would go, oh, Cheers is on. Oh, MASH is on. Oh, Mary Tyler Moore is on. All in the Family's on. You just expected there'll be some funny stuff we can watch on TV tonight. Well, guess what? Where is it? This is the result of the extreme left and PC crap and people worrying so much about offending other people. When you write a script and it goes into 4 or 5 different hands, committees, groups, here's our thought about this joke, well, that's the end of your comedy. They move the gates, like in skiing. Culture, the gates are moving. Your job is to be agile and clever enough that wherever they put the gates, I'm gonna make the gate.
Okay, I'm not an expert on comedy. We're gonna turn to Aida, the expert in comedy, in just one moment. I just want to say, there are still comedies on TV. You can watch, you can watch Abbott Elementary. It's hilarious. There's still, I know MASH isn't on the air anymore. It hasn't been on the air in 50 years. There's still funny things on TV that you can watch. And I would also just say, and he's a full-grown person. He's obviously a smart person. I feel like I shouldn't have to say this, but when you list all of those classic TV shows, All in the Family, those sorts of Cheers, whatever, MASH, and you'd say you'd go home and watch that and just laugh. Who's the you in that sentence? Was everybody always equally comfortable with that content? Or is it that you just didn't hear from the people who weren't included in the you at that point? Just look at the context, maybe Jerry Seinfeld, maybe think about that. Hey, I'm glad you're here. Listen, in order for the Damage Report to keep on going, we need viewers like you to become a member on YouTube. Can you click the join button on YouTube today? Thank you. But Aida, you are the expert. What do you think about this? Is there something to what he's saying?
Well, once people get a hold of this, they'll invalidate me and tell me that I'm nobody compared to Jerry Seinfeld. So there's always that. But I am a human being, and my opinion does matter too. And I will say, I remember when they asked Cat Williams about it, and Cat Williams, who is a Black male comedian who's also older and has had a lot of success, he said comedy should evolve. Things that were not acceptable back in the day. It's easy to say that when you're in a place of always at the top of the food chain and a place of power. When you look at old videos of Black people having to watch, comedians do blackface, and you see people making fun of Black people throughout history and brown people. I'm a Puerto Rican woman. I've been a joke for years of being a violent woman, having a knife, having someone who has multiple children from different fathers. These are the things that I heard about myself in the comedy space from other people. And then having the audience treat me accordingly after the show, after hearing a comedian say that in front of me. I do think that PC culture has been damaging to comedy as well as everybody else, because I think white supremacy is always damaging to people of color, no matter what space it is in. And there are a lot of liberals and extreme lefties who want to monitor and tell people of color what they can and can't say. It's not themselves that they're, the consequences for us are far more, dire. That's why a lot of people of color are not speaking up about Palestine. That's why a lot of people of color are not speaking up about things that are going to offend white people because their livelihoods are depending on it. But absolutely, I do think that, I think white people are damaging to all people of color in terms of comedy when it's whether they're right wing or left wing, because if they're offended, they want to shut it down. Because I have had right wingers at my show who have been upset and reported me because they don't like that I use certain language or that I make jokes about white people. It is infuriating, and it is also deeply frustrating to constantly being monitored by people who are offended, who are of the ruling class. And that is a very, very difficult thing to deal with. Being a woman and having to hear people say, I should be able to do my jokes about raping you, or about how you're stupid and about how you're dumb. And listen, this is my point, which is what's always been my point. If a spectrum existed and all of that existed over here, where you white guys get to say all the stuff you want to say, and we had a balanced system where there were enough of us who had a voice and had an outlet where we could also speak to no, I'm not stupid. No, I'm not dumb. No, I don't get drunk in clubs and act a certain way. Then it would be a balanced field, but it's not. You guys have the mic. You get to say whatever you want to say all the time. And then when the people who are the butt of the jokes are saying, I don't like that because people treat me a certain way because of all of the stuff that the media is putting out about us, including comedy, it can be in a space. And so, it's a very nuanced conversation. And I don't respect the thinking that all people are the same in a group. And to say that all left-wing people are the reason why comedy is ruined. We have the argument that the right-wingers who are in charge of comedy and have power don't give us enough space and say, hey, all the right-wingers are ruining comedy. I think we are more intelligent than that, than to be able to say that everybody is responsible for something. And I think that when you talk about comedy, whoever's in charge usually looks like Jerry Seinfeld. Mm-hmm. And they get to say what is and what isn't. And it's really hard for people who look like me and who are different to have an opportunity to shine. Because if we don't sound like you and say what you're saying, we don't get an outlet. Late night television, we don't get the opportunity to do late night sets unless we're pandering to these white men who want us to do the dance. Or we want you to be non-threatening. I've had a late night booker refer to my comedy about my life as to being racist, negative, and violent. That's how he referred to my life. So you hear these people saying these things and you're like, no, it's not all left-wing people. There are right-wing people who don't want you to say, we're in an era where people get mad because they're mad at you because you're saying something they don't agree with. Mm-hmm. This is more, this goes far beyond being a left-wing ideology and a right-wing ideology. The people in charge are the ones that are violent and are not allowing us in the spaces. If we were allowed to have the popularity, we were getting paid as much, we were allowed to have a voice, that wouldn't be such a problem. But the problem is that we don't, and they are the ones telling the stories.
Yeah. I agree with a lot of what you said there, and just like as a preface to my final comments, I like Seinfeld. I like the show Seinfeld. I like Seinfeld on Seinfeld. I know a lot of people say that they only really like Kramer and Julie Louis-Dreyfus and all that. I thought Seinfeld was good in Seinfeld. I think he's funny. I've never been a huge fan of his stand-up even back then, but so he can have his opinion. And I get that he's going to constrain his thoughts about censorship to how it's affecting comedy because that's what he does. But the thing that bothers me always when you hear commentary like what he said is that he only talks about what he sees as left-wing censorship of like jokes that offend people. And I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. It does happen. I would also say that like he thinks everyone should just be fine with jokes mocking you now and in the 80s or 90s. But it's not the same for everyone. Like if a white guy in the 90s gets a joke about him, it is just a joke. He's not continually being assaulted by like every aspect of American politics, society, the economy and all that. So there's some context to that. But also it's that he just did that video and he's mad at the left because the left is saying, I don't like that joke about trans people or whatever. Meanwhile, on the right, try to make Black Panther and see what they think about everybody just being able to make whatever kind of art they want. They don't want Brie Larson to be in Captain Marvel. They don't think Wonder Woman should exist. How dare you have a black Little Mermaid? They have all sorts of thoughts about what should be allowed on the screen, big or large, but that doesn't merit conversation. having a problem with a joke about trans people, that's literally the only thing you should ever talk about. But them literally trying to segregate popular culture along race grounds, gender grounds, sexual grounds. How dare you're gonna have a gay kiss in that movie? We will boycott the entire company behind that. And Jerry Seinfeld doesn't have any thoughts about that. Now, granted, that's more about art than comedy specifically. But if you want to talk about censorship, there's a big conversation to be had about censorship. And it does not start and end with you shouldn't make that joke about a gay guy or whatever. There's a lot more than just that.
Now, I will say in his defense, he was the only person on a panel where there were Black people that told Louis C.K. that he shouldn't use the N-word. And he did speak up for that. Because I don't think Jerry Seinfeld is a bad guy. I just think sometimes when you're that rich and that successful, you get a little bit disconnected or are disconnected from those of us who are on the ground that have to go places where people, when a comedian makes a comment, this has happened to me about the size of my breasts. And now I have 20 men walking out the comedy club saying, let me see, they are big. That is a problem. And that is not something I have to deal with at the Improv because somebody decided that they were upset that I had a good set. And the way to attack me was to attack me physically as opposed to something about my comedy.
Yeah.
And I'm not a victim. So just so that anybody, I don't feel like a victim because I stand up for myself. But the reality of it is that is real. That is very real.
Okay. And yeah, I don't know Jerry Seinfeld. I'm not saying he's a bad guy. I'm saying that he is very hung up on this in a way that a lot of older comics are, and that's fine. That's part of the conversation. But like, could we have the Marvels come out and not have people brigade it online because how dare they put a Black woman or a Muslim woman in a movie? Like, can a Predator movie come out starring a Native woman not immediately get like destroyed on the internet because how dare they put a woman in a movie like that? Like these like censorship is again a broad thing that I think we need to grapple with as a society. When you click the join button and become a tier 2 member, you get access to all of our weekly top 10 lists. What are you waiting for?